Imagine waking up one morning to the news that your government has decided to put a price tag on your freedom. Not a small fee, but a staggering financial penalty amounting to hundreds of thousands of dollars, simply for choosing to take your skills, your talents, and your ambition to another country. It sounds like the plot of a dystopian novel, or perhaps a policy you might expect from a regime that tightly controls its citizens. But this is exactly what was proposed recently at the Liberal Party of Canada's main convention in Montreal. A man named Patrick Pichette, the former chief financial officer of Google Canada, took the stage and suggested that Canadians who want to move to the United States, taking their skills and talents with them, should be forced to pay a tax of up to $500,000 for the mere privilege of leaving the country. It is a proposal that immediately triggers a profound sense of disbelief. And when you unpack it, it reveals a deeply troubling mindset about the relationship between a government and its people. Let us break down exactly why this idea is not only legally flawed, but economically dangerous, and what it says about the current state of our nation. Let us start with the most fundamental law of the land, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Section 6 of the Charter explicitly states that every citizen of Canada has the right to enter, remain in, and leave Canada. This is not a suggestion. It is not a guideline. It is a constitutionally protected fundamental freedom. The very essence of this right is that the government cannot arbitrarily restrict your ability to move, to travel, or to relocate your life. Pichette's idea, right from the starting gate, is a direct violation of the Charter. You cannot levy a massive financial penalty on someone for exercising a constitutional right. If the government were allowed to charge you $500,000 to leave, then the right to leave effectively ceases to exist for the vast majority of the population. It becomes a right reserved exclusively for the ultra-wealthy. That is not freedom. That is a gated community built by the state. But beyond the legal technicalities, what bothers me the most about this proposal is the underlying philosophy that you as a citizen cannot take your skills wherever you want. It implies that you are not free to move around as you see fit, as if your abilities belong to the state, and you must buy them back before you can walk out the door. This is the sort of policy we expect to see in developing nations and third world countries, not in a modern, advanced G7 democracy. Authoritarian regimes and struggling economies frequently put strict restrictions on how much currency their citizens can take out of the country. They do this because their economies are deeply flawed. They do not generate a lot of economic growth. They do not attract a lot of foreign investment. And they are terrified of capital flight. Because they have very little currency coming in, the government puts limits on how much currency can leave. They essentially trap their citizens' wealth inside the borders because they have no faith in their own system's ability to generate new wealth. I once had friends who moved from the Bahamas. The Bahamas had, and in many ways still has, highly restrictive currency policies. It took my friends years of careful planning, moving a little bit of money at a time, just to get their own funds out of the country. It was a ridiculous, exhausting, and entirely unnecessary ordeal. It was a sign of a country that did not believe in its own economic potential. And that is exactly the signal that Pichette's argument sends to the world. Suggesting that Canadians should pay a $500,000 tax to leave is an admission that Canada is no longer productive enough nor competitive enough to keep its best people here voluntarily. Now, let us take a step back and look at the sheer logistics of this proposal. I am not entirely sure how the government would even enforce such a tax. Currently, in Canada, you do not have to register with the federal government simply because you are leaving the country. There is no formal exit form to fill out. There is no toll-free number you have to call to say, hey, I am packing up and moving to the United States. People move across the border for work, for family, and for lifestyle changes every single day. Would the government station auditors at the border? Would they track your mail forwarding address? Would they demand a check before they allow your moving truck to cross into New York or Michigan? The administrative nightmare of tracking who is leaving, determining whose skills are valuable enough to warrant the tax, and then actually collecting the money would be staggering. Furthermore, how do you define the value of a skill? Is a software engineer worth a $500,000 exit tax, but a plumber is not? What about a doctor or a teacher? The subjective nature of deciding whose talents are worth taxing is a slippery slope straight into a bureaucratic dystopia. While some countries like the United States do have exit taxes for individuals renouncing their citizenship, specifically targeting those with massive unrealized capital gains or high net worth, those taxes are about capturing untaxed wealth, not penalizing human capital. Pichette's proposal is entirely different. It is a penalty for having ambition and wanting to seek a better life. And let us be perfectly honest about why this conversation is even happening right now. This is happening because Canada is failing to keep its best and brightest, and the Americans are right next door, offering them a far better deal. And this talent drain is occurring even after all the political turmoil in the United States, even after Trump's tariffs, and even amidst their ongoing trade wars. If our best people are still choosing to leave despite the political chaos south of the border, that should be a deafening alarm bell for every policymaker in Ottawa. Why is it that Canadians are so eager to leave? Well, let us look at the hard numbers. Last year, the Bank of Canada released data showing that Canada's per capita income had fallen behind the lowest state in the United States. Think about that for a moment. Not the highest state, not the average state, but the absolute lowest state in the US. Our per capita income in Canada is roughly $54,000. In Alabama, it is pushing $70,000. And overall, in the United States, the average per capita income is around $76,000. American per capita income is a staggering 40% higher than ours. And to add insult to injury, their tax rates are generally lower than ours. This means that not only do Americans make significantly more money on paper, but they also get to keep a much larger portion of what they earn. You make a lot more money, and you get to keep a lot more of it. That is an incredibly powerful magnet for talent. No amount of patriotism can overcome a 40% wage gap combined with a lower tax burden. So, what should Canada do? The answer is incredibly straightforward, even if the political will to execute it is painfully absent. Our taxes are simply too high. They are too high because our government is too big. The size and scope of the federal government have expanded massively over the last decade, and maintaining that bloated apparatus requires an enormous amount of capital. Because the government is so large, it has to borrow vast sums of money just to pay for its own existence. We are running massive deficits year after year, and it is showing absolutely no sign of slowing down, even under the potential leadership of Mark Carney, a man who has been the head of 2 central banks, who understands the mechanics of global finance as well as anyone on the planet, and who should absolutely know better. There is no serious sign of attempting to rein in the expense of government. There is no genuine commitment to reducing the amount the government borrows. Because the government refuses to shrink its own size, it is forced to keep taxes high. It has to squeeze every drop it can from the productive class, the workers, the innovators, the entrepreneurs, to feed a bureaucratic machine that produces nothing but red tape. When you tax productivity at this level, you kill the incentive to produce. And when you kill the incentive to produce, the producers leave. It is basic human nature. But it is not just about taxes. We have a massive regulation problem in this country. We have too many obstacles standing in the way of development, innovation, and progress. We have provincial obstacles that make interprovincial trade more difficult than trading with foreign nations. We have a regulatory environment that makes resource development a multi-year, billion-dollar gamble. We have layered approvals, environmental assessments that stretch on indefinitely, and a constant moving of the goalposts for major projects. All of this has turned Canada into an unserious country for investors. Investment capital is agnostic. It goes where it is welcomed, where it is protected, and where it can grow. It does not care about patriotism. It does not care about nice words from politicians. It cares about returns. And right now, Canada is not providing those returns. Under the Trudeau government, this country lost an estimated $500 billion in investment capital. $500 billion. That is not a rounding error. That is a generational catastrophe. That is money that would have built factories, funded research, started tech companies, and hired thousands of skilled workers. But because there were too many obstacles in the way, that money packed up and went somewhere else. Is it any wonder that people are moving out of the country? There is not enough capital flowing in to invest in industry, to build infrastructure, or to provide the high-paying, world-class opportunities that skilled people demand. If you are a brilliant engineer, a top-tier software developer, or a visionary entrepreneur, and you have a choice between building your career in a country that actively punishes success and one that rewards it, the choice is obvious. But beyond all the economics, beyond the tax rates, and beyond the investment numbers, there is something deeply unsettling about the philosophical foundation of Pichette's argument. It rests on this insidious notion that we, as individual citizens, owe more to the country than the country owes to us. It is a one-way street of obligation. It propagates the idea that because you were trained here, because you grew up here, because you went to publicly funded schools or utilized the healthcare system, you therefore have a moral and financial obligation to stay here indefinitely or pay a massive ransom if you choose to leave. This is a fundamentally flawed and deeply un-Canadian way of looking at the social contract. The truth is, if you have worked hard, paid your taxes, contributed to your community, and followed the rules, your debt to society is paid in full, every single day. You do not belong to the state. Your skills are not government property. Your ambition is not a natural resource to be taxed at the border. A healthy, confident, and prosperous nation does not hold its citizens hostage. A healthy nation builds an environment so dynamic, so rich with opportunity, and so full of promise that people would never want to leave. A confident nation does not build walls to keep people in. It builds bridges to attract the world's best and brightest. Pichette's argument is so profoundly anti-charter and so thoroughly anti-economic that it is genuinely astonishing it came from a senior executive at a major technology company. You would expect someone from the tech sector, an industry built on the free movement of talent, on disruption, and on breaking down borders, to understand the value of an open, competitive market for human capital. Instead, he advocated for the exact opposite, a closed, captive market where the government dictates your worth and charges you for your freedom. So, where do we go from here? How do we fix this trajectory? The solution is not to punish the people who want to leave. The solution is to give them a reason to stay. Canada needs a radical shift in its economic policy. We need to drastically simplify our tax code and lower the marginal tax rates on income and capital gains so that hard work and innovation are actually rewarded. We need to shrink the size of the federal government, eliminate redundant departments, and stop bleeding taxpayer dollars into inefficient programs that do not deliver results. We need a regulatory overhaul. We need to make it easier, not harder, to build a factory, to start a mine, to lay a pipeline, or to launch a tech startup. We need to tear down the interprovincial trade barriers that make it harder to do business inside our own country than it is to do business with the United States or Europe. We need to signal to the world, and more importantly, to our own citizens, that Canada is open for business again. We need to replace the mindset of "you owe us" with the mindset of "we are building something you want to be a part of." If we can create an environment where per capita incomes are rising, where investment capital is flooding in, where taxes are competitive, and where opportunity is abundant, the brain drain will reverse itself. We will not need a $500,000 exit tax because nobody will want to leave. In fact, we will have to beat back the talented people from around the world who will be begging to get in. Let us double down on the reality of the economic gap because the numbers do not lie. When we talk about a 40% difference in per capita income, we are not just talking about a number on a spreadsheet. We are talking about the quality of life that a person can afford. We are talking about whether a young family can afford to buy a home, whether a middle-class worker can save for retirement, and whether a senior can live out their final years in dignity. The cost of living in Canada has skyrocketed. Housing affordability is at an all-time low. Groceries, fuel, and basic utilities are consuming a larger and larger chunk of the average Canadian's paycheck every month. Meanwhile, just across the border, that same paycheck goes significantly further. The American economy has its flaws, absolutely, but it has one thing that Canada currently lacks: a relentless drive for growth. They reward risk. They celebrate success. They make it relatively easy to start a business and scale it to a global level. In Canada, if you succeed, you are often viewed with suspicion. The immediate instinct of the political class is to figure out how to tax that success, how to regulate it, or how to redistribute it. That is a toxic environment for ambition. When a country punishes its most productive citizens, those citizens will eventually pack their bags. And they are. The talent drain is not a myth. It is happening in our hospitals, our tech firms, our engineering firms, and our financial sectors. The best and brightest are looking at the math, looking at the border, and making a perfectly rational decision. Proposing an exit tax is akin to a failing restaurant deciding to charge its customers a fee for walking out the door instead of improving the food, lowering the prices, and cleaning up the dining room. It is a desperate, cynical move that will only accelerate the decline. It is also crucial to recognize the political context in which this proposal was made. It was not made at a fringe convention. It was made at the main convention of the Liberal Party of Canada, a party that has held power for the better part of the last decade. This is the party that has overseen the decline in our per capita income. This is the party that has presided over the loss of $500 billion in investment. This is the party that has vastly expanded the size of the government and driven our national debt to record levels. For a senior figure to stand up at their convention and suggest that the solution to Canada's competitiveness problem is not to fix the economy, but to build a financial wall around the country is incredibly revealing. It reveals a mindset that views citizens as subjects. It reveals a mindset that believes the state is the master and the people are the servants. It reveals a profound lack of imagination and a total absence of accountability. If the economy is struggling, the answer is not to trap the workers. The answer is to change the policies that are failing the workers. The fact that this idea was even floated, let alone at a major political convention, should be a wake-up call for every single Canadian. It should tell you that the people in charge are not interested in earning your loyalty through good governance. They are interested in coercing it through financial force. We need to have a serious national conversation about our future. Do we want to be a country that attracts the world's best and brightest, or do we want to be a country that traps its own people? Do we want to be an economic powerhouse, or do we want to be a stagnant, declining state that relies on punitive measures to survive? The choice is ours. We can continue down the current path of high taxes, massive deficits, suffocating regulation, and declining productivity. If we do, the brain drain will only accelerate, and no exit tax will be large enough to stop it. Or we can choose a different path. We can choose to dismantle the barriers to growth. We can choose to reward hard work and innovation. We can choose to build an economy where a software engineer, a doctor, or an entrepreneur can build their dreams right here at home, without ever looking south and wondering what might have been. The fact that this proposal was met with any level of approval, rather than immediate and universal rejection, is a symptom of a deeper malaise in our political discourse. We have normalized the idea that the government has a right to control our economic destiny. We have normalized the idea that individual success is a resource to be harvested by the state rather than a triumph to be celebrated by the nation. It is time to reject that notion entirely. It is time to remind our leaders that they work for us, not the other way around. It is time to demand an economy that is so strong, so vibrant, and so full of opportunity that the very idea of an exit tax becomes laughable. That is the Canada we should be building. That is the Canada we deserve. Thank you for exploring this critical issue today. The conversation about Canada's economic future and our fundamental rights is more important now than ever. If you found this analysis valuable, please hit the like button to help this message reach more Canadians. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an update on the policies shaping our future. Share this video with your friends, family, and colleagues. Let us get people talking and demand better for our country. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on this proposal. Is an exit tax the right way to keep talent or a dangerous step backward? I read every comment and look forward to your perspective. Take care, stay informed, and keep fighting for a prosperous Canada. Smart Pension Canada.